Good morning and welcome to the Empty Nesters Life Stage class. I hope everybody had a good week this week. It was a shortened week because we had Memorial Day on Monday, and I hope you enjoyed your long weekend. And as if everybody hasn't had a lot of long weekends just recently with stay-at-home orders and COVID and people not going into work. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed your time off. I hope you spent some time with family, and I hope you remembered those who paid the price. And that's kind of a little bit what I wanted to talk about this morning. Uh, just this past week, we celebrated Memorial Day here in our country. Uh, it's a day that we set aside to honor those who paid the ultimate price and gave their lives in defense of our country. We have probably all been associated with or have known somebody who has paid that price. I know when I was a young kid, our next door neighbor had got drafted and sent off to Vietnam, and he was killed in action in Vietnam. Uh, and I remembered the funeral, and I remember the procession that went by. And it was very sad for our neighbors and a very difficult time. It's heroes like that we honor on Memorial Day who have given that ultimate sacrifice. Um, so God gives us examples in His Word that He desires us to set up monuments and to remember these people and to remember the good things that these people, that other people, and that God has done for us. He's given us examples in His Word. He knows that when the difficult times come, that we need these remembrances to strengthen our faith, and to strengthen our resolve to make sure that some of these things never occur again in our lifetimes or in our country, that we don't go through the same problems again. So we have to fight, and we have to make sure that we maintain that freedom. And there are many, many people who have given their lives for that freedom. And so we as not only as Christians but as American citizens have the responsibility to make our voice heard, whether it's through voting or through other things, to make sure that we maintain, to make sure that we keep that freedom, so that we have a freedom to worship as we see fit, so that we have freedom to praise and worship our God without any restrictions. So that's something that we have a responsibility to do. In 1 Samuel chapter 31, verse 11 through 13, it says, "And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard of that which the Philistines had done to Saul, all of the valiant men arose and went all night, and they took the body of Saul and the bodies of his son from the wall of Bethshan, and came to Jabesh and burnt them there. They took their bones and buried them under a tree at Jabesh and fasted for 7 days." So one of the first acts of Saul as king of Israel was to gather together an army to defend the city of Jabesh from an attacking force that threatened to destroy the city and everyone who lived there. Now the people of Jabesh never forgot this. The people of Jabesh were so thankful to Saul because he saved them from an invading force. So years later, when they had heard that Saul and his sons had been killed by the Philistines in battle, and that they took their bodies and they publicly displayed them on the walls of the city to humiliate them, they launched a nighttime raid to recover the bodies and bury them with honor. To bury them with honor. After they buried their bodies, they honored them by fasting for 7 days. For 7 days. So if they're going to take this risk in the middle of the night to remove these bodies off the wall, and basically they were under the threat of death had they disturbed those bodies. Now this invading force, or this force, the Philistines, had overtaken the Israelites, and they had killed their king and the king's sons, and they took their bodies and they put them on the wall. So this smaller town of Jabesh, this smaller city of Jabesh, that sent this small force out there to get the bodies of Saul, to recover them. They did it under the cover of darkness because they were afraid that they would have gotten killed or something would have happened to them had they tried to take them during the day or go against this more powerful force. So they got the bodies, they retrieved the bodies, they took and they burned them, and then they took their bones and they buried them under a tree at Jabesh. Now, they took and they fasted for 7 days. They fasted for 7 days. That's how much that Saul meant to them. That's how much that they appreciated what Saul had done for them uh, back when he first became king. So they never forgot. They never forgot. So they wanted to honor Saul and his sons by doing this and burying their bodies, by taking that mark of shame that their bodies were displayed on the wall as like a war trophy, and they were take that humiliation away from them by burying their body and honoring them. So the people of Jabesh and Gilead were not willing to forget what had been done for them by those who had been willing to pay the price for their freedom, for their freedom, just like many people in this country have paid the price for our freedom. So during difficult times, we also need to remember that the things that God has done for us and all the provisions that He has given us. Now, we're going through some pretty difficult times now, whether it's economic downturn or whether it's loss of jobs or whether it's illnesses, whatever the situation might be. We've been going through some difficult times. And we need to remember how God in the past has provided for us, the things that He has done for us in the past. We know that God has been faithful to us. He has been faithful to me in so many ways, so many ways. And I need to remember that because at times we start to look around at the things that are going on, we get discouraged. We get a little bit discouraged, we get a little bit downtrodden, and we start to get thinking about, well, where's God? Why isn't God helping us through this? You know, sometimes we sit and maybe this question has crossed your mind. Why can't God just stop this pandemic now? Why can't God just reveal all the evil that is going on in the world so that people can plainly see it and understand? And God has a greater plan. God knows the end, and God knows exactly what He's doing. We have very limited vision. We have very limited knowledge. So we don't know what's going to happen or what's going to go on, but God does. So God has a plan. And you know what? We just need to be willing to be a part of that plan. So we need to tell God, hey, God, just use me in any way you can. In any way you can. I trust in you, and I put all my faith and trust in you that you know what you're doing. So we had a little bit of a discussion, and maybe I did most of the talking, but we had a little bit of discussion on our Zoom call this last Thursday. And I talked a little bit about how it looks to be sometimes that it's discouraging, the things that are going on around us, the things that people are doing around us. You know, there's conspiracy theories floating around out there, which I tend to believe some of them. But that how the government so easily controlled us, how the government so easily controlled people and putting them in quarantine and doing different things. Now I understand that there is a virus out there, and I understand that there is an illness out there that people are suffering from, and we need to do whatever we can to keep from spreading this illness, and we need to do whatever we can to be smart about it and to use common sense about this thing. But I also think that some advantage has been taken by some people, and so anyways, we've talked about these things, and you know, it can be discouraging, and we can look about how some of our freedoms may have been stripped away from us. We can look at it as some difficult times that we have gone through, and I know people have different opinions about a lot of the events that have been happening. But one of the main things that I talked about on the Zoom call was how our God has everything in His hand. He has everything in the palm of His hand. He understands it all, He knows it all, and He has allowed these things to happen. He has allowed them to happen for a reason. And you know what? One of the things that we should do is to find out well, God, why are these things happening? And how has it affected me? And is there something that I need to learn out of this? That's a wonderful opportunity for us to do that. And I need not worry. Why? Because God has it in His hand. I'm in God's hand. And God has a good, expected end for me. He only has goodness planned for me and goodness in my future. That's all God wants for His children. So why should I have to worry? Why should I have to fret over any of it? Why? That's a wonderful wonderful thing that we have in our hearts, that we can have that peace that passes all understanding. We've talked about this in past lessons, and so it's a good feeling to know that our God has all this in His hand. And you know what? We need to be excited about this. We know that a lot of these things are going to happen in the end days, and it should be very exciting for us. And we should be looking forward to what God is going to do next. But at the same time, we need to stay close to Him. And we need to be about our work, working for Him and telling others about Him so that they can understand also. So we're going through these difficult times. God promises to take care of us. God promises that He is going to take care of us and provide for us. We need to set up reminders in our life and remember the things that God has done for all of us and all the provisions He has given us. Um, so, and I talked a little bit about this in last Sunday's lesson about how God will make sure that we have all sufficiency in all things. If we are cheerful givers and we continue to give and we continue to do what God asks us to do, that God will make sure that we have all sufficiency in all things. God promises to provide for all of our needs. He illustrates this through His provisions for the Israelite people while they wandered in the wilderness. Um, just like the Israelite people, God has taken care of us and promises to continue to take care of us as long as we live. We need to remember the good things that God's done for us and pass these things down to the next generation. Things like how God drew us to Him, how He can and how He carries us through the difficult times. He's carried us, many of us, through many difficult times, and we know that. We know that. We got to remember those things and bring those things back to remembrance and pass them down to our children. Pass them down to our children. You know, one of the wonderful things that my parents did, and I think I've told you this story before, that when I was a young boy, I was about 8 or 9 years old, um, my sister had a lump in her neck. And my parents didn't really notice it until, it got a little, kind of large. It was about the size of a small orange or something. And they took her to the doctor, and the doctor told her that she had 6 months to live because she had Hodgkin's lymphoma. So back then, in the 70s, they didn't have a cure for it. It was basically, we'll keep you comfortable, and we don't have a cure for it, and there's something that nothing we really can do for it. So they gave her medication, and they figured that they can prolong her life as much as possible, but they only gave her 6 months to live. So, and the disease eventually did take my sister. She was 12 years old at the time, and throughout all this situation, my dad was searching. He was searching for answers. He really wanted answers, and we were going to a Catholic church at the time, and he tried to get answers from the Catholic priest, and he couldn't get any answers from the Catholic priest, and he even had a difficult time just even getting in to see him. But some neighbors down the road invited us to a club called Brigade. It was sort of like Awanas, and we went to this Awanas, and they preached the gospel to us, and we came home and told our parents we got saved, and our parents said, "Oh, that's pretty cool. That's nice. Good for you," type thing, and. And that was, about a year or so before my sister died. But then that church that held the brigades, they were going through the cards of the kids that went to this club, and they found our card right at about that time when my sister was in the hospital and ill. They found that card, and the pastor said, "Why don't we go visit these McCarthy people? Why don't we go visit the McCarthy people?" And they did come and visit, and they talked to my mom and dad, and this is at the time that they were really searching for answers. And, well, it led to my mom and dad's salvation. It led to my mom and dad accepting Christ as their Savior and understanding a little bit more. And And it was such a difficult time for my parents when my sister died. But they had that faith and trust in the Lord already at that point. And it eased them a little bit. It gave them some comfort to know where my sister went, to know what my sister had gone through, to be there with her each and every step of the way. So, um, this is something that the Lord used that disease in my sister to draw our family to Him, to draw our family to Him. So, a while back, it's quite a few years ago, my mom and dad went and had 8 by 10 portraits made up of my sister, one of the pictures she had taken, and I gave them to each one of us. And when they gave them to each one of us, they said that, this is a picture of your sister, a wonderful picture of your sister, and we want you to always remember her. And we want you to always remember that the Lord used her and that situation that she went through to draw us to Him. And it's a monument, it's a memory in our family. And I took those things and I told my children about them. I told my children about them. I said, you know what? This is how the Lord brought our family to Him. And it's something we need to remember. It's something that we need to pass on to the generation to generation. And I hope my children one day can take that same picture and say, you know what? My dad, I had an aunt. I had an aunt. And this is the story of my aunt. And this is how God used her to draw our family to Him. And through that, we're going to have an eternity in heaven. Through that, we're going to have an eternity that God used that to draw us to Him. That God used that. He used this death of my sister to draw us close to Him. So it's things like that that we need to have in our lives to remember that God placed these things in our lives so that we can use them in the future to strengthen our faith. In Hebrews chapter 9, verses 3 through 5, it says, after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot that held manna, and Aaron's rod that budded, and the tables of the covenant. And over it the cherubims of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. Now, to meet the needs of the Israelites in the wilderness, God sent manna 6 days a week. This practice continued day after day, year after year. The people were not allowed to keep any overnight to provide for the next day, except on the day before the Sabbath. Yet they were never left without provision. Never. God was always faithful to have that manna there each and every day, and double on Saturday, or double on the day before the Sabbath. So each and every day. Each and every day. So, yet they were never without provision. When they finally crossed the Jordan River and had access to the food in the land, the manna stopped. They no longer needed it, so the manna stopped. In Joshua chapter 5, verse 12, it says, and the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. So though the manna no longer fell on a daily basis, God did not want the people to forget what He had done for them. He didn't want them to forget. One of the reminders He instructed the Israelites to keep was a golden pot filled with manna that was kept in the Ark of the Covenant. There would be difficult days that the people would face, and times that they would know how their needs would be met. They didn't know how their needs would be met. But in those moments, they would be able to look back on what God had done for them in the past and be encouraged. And be encouraged. It doesn't always work, though, does it? We tend to forget these things. When difficult times come, we tend to forget these things. Sometimes we panic. Sometimes we're just so upset, and so our eyes are just on us and our woes and how we feel sorry for ourselves, that we forget all the good things that God's done for us. But we need to look back. We need to make those monuments in our life that we can see, like that picture of my sister hanging on the wall. Whenever we walk by and see that picture, we can remember. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. So, These are the monuments we need in our life. These are the things we need so that we remember each and every time. The thanks that we offer to God for the blessings we receive are good, but they must not just be in the moment. We should remember what we had done with, or we should remember what God has done with and for us, what God has done with us and what God has done for us in the past to help us face the future. To help us face the future. Now, again, we celebrate Memorial Day. We set up a day, a Memorial Day, so that we do not forget those who paid that ultimate price. Each year, we celebrate those who paid the horrible price of death in war. Now, uh, yeah, these days many people use it as an excuse to party, an extra day off of work, but many, many people still remember the sacrifices that were made, the ultimate sacrifice. Every day in America, we enjoy a level of political and religious freedom that is unprecedented in history. But that freedom has been purchased at a very, very high price. In his Memorial Day speech in 1982, President Ronald Reagan said, "I have no illusion about what little to the I can add now to the silent testimony of those who gave their lives willingly for this country. Yet, we must try to honor them, not for their sakes alone, but for our own. And if words cannot repay the debt we owe these men, surely with our actions we must strive to keep faith with them and with the vision that led them into battle and to that final sacrifice. To that final sacrifice. It's only right. It's only right that we remember and honor those who have made sacrifices on our behalf. Whether they're sacrifices for our freedom, whether it's sacrifices that our parents made for us throughout our lives, we should honor them. Honor them. Remember and honor them. Those sacrifices that your parents made for you. Those sacrifices that others made for you. Honor them and be thankful. Those sacrifices that God has made for you, His Son. Honor that, be thankful, and be compelled by the love of Christ to do His will. These are things that are reasonable. These are things that we ought to do. So, I hope you enjoyed your Monday Memorial Day. I hope you really did. But I hope you remembered those who paid that sacrifice for you. And I hope you remember and set up memorials for the things that God has done for you. And remember that those things, when you look back on them, will strengthen your faith to face the future. So, until next week, I hope you have a good week. So thank you.